Right, good morning and welcome to Survival Skills and my new Elevenses show, which I'll be running for you over the next few months, I suspect, as we all sit out the coronavirus crisis. Um, okay, so um, let me just explain what we're doing today. As I say, you're watching Survival Skills. Kevin Williams here, bringing you Elevenses, the topical news, controversial views, and biking tips show. It's Friday, isn't it? We've already been 10 days in lockdown here in the UK, and in London, it's another looking out the window. It's a sort of grey, slightly chilly day, but the promise is that spring's just around the corner. So, what are we bringing you today? Well, today's stories. I'm going to start off with an update on what's going on with the smart motorways. We may not be out there using them much at the moment, but they are still there. And I'll just update you on what's happening about the vehicle detection system going in place. I'll also bring you the latest on the Norton debacle. We'll move on and then have a quick look at what's been cancelled, what's been postponed in terms of motorcycle events around the country. And finally, at the end of the show, I'll be bringing you some regular tips over the next few weeks on what you can do with your bike while it's parked up, and ways of looking after it and making sure that the bike actually stays in good condition while it's parked. So, okay, if you're with us now, we'll carry on. Stay tuned to the end of the show, and if you can't, then you can use the catch up later. Okay, just remember we are on YouTube and we are also here, obviously, on Facebook with the catch up shows. So if you've got something to ask, something to question about anything, comments, just drop them off in the comment box and I will get back to you when I go off air at the end of the show. And likewise, if you've got any suggestions for any items that you'd like to see covered, also drop them off in the comment box, and I'll see what I can do for you. Right, okay, and of course, if you do miss a show, as I say, you can catch it later here or on my YouTube channel. All right, okay, so on with the first item. Um, the expression that springs to mind is here is if it's broke, we'll fix it. We're talking about the smart motorways. Now, if you've been following me online, you'll know that I have talked about this in my post on Facebook on several occasions. Essentially, I've never been entirely happy that the so-called smart motorways are actually all that safe. Now, just a reminder, there are two kinds of smart motorways. There are the ones where the hard shoulder, the lane to the side of the main running lanes, for those who don't know the term, who might be watching from abroad, it's sometimes called a refuge lane. The hard shoulder has been converted to a running lane. Now, on the some of the schemes, it's a part-time conversion, so there'll be under normal circumstances, the hard shoulder stays the hard shoulder. It stays a refuge for broken down vehicles. But when when the road is congested, particularly mornings and evenings, obviously during the rush hour, then that lane is opened up for use by traffic as a normal running lane. And that's indicated by overhead gantry signs, whether it's available or not. However, that initial use was soon changed somewhat by a permanent running lane on what was formerly that refuge, the hard shoulder. So, in other words, the entire width of the carriageway was now available for traffic to use full time. In both cases, what happened was that they had to obviously put somewhere for vehicles to stop in case of emergencies, and what they did was they built in some refuges. Now, the problem is that those refuges are at intervals down the road. Um, and if you can't reach the refuge, then you've got a problem. Now, I got some prior experience of broken down myself on motorways. Many years ago, we're going back now to probably, let me think, late 1970s. I had a rear tyre blowout, tubed tyre, on the M4, and I was able to bring the bike to a safe, a slightly unstable halt on the hard shoulder refuge. Now, if I'd have had that blowout on a live running lane, um, anybody's guess what would have happened. Um, Rather more dramatically, well, probably dramatically, probably for the vehicles behind. I grenaded the engine on a vehicle. I was on the M25 this time. Fortunately, it was late at night, so there wasn't much traffic around. But what happened was, I discovered later, was a bolt had gone through the radiator. So literally within seconds, the radiator had lost all the cooling fluid. The engine overheated. The first warning I had was that the heater went off. It was a very cold day, and suddenly the heater was blowing cold air. And whilst I was kind of looking at the heater and wondering why the heater had gone off, I just had time to spot the temperature gauge had gone into the red, and the engine seized. Cracked the crankcases, threw hot oil all over the exhaust pipe, so I'd suddenly enveloped in a cloud of smoke. And fortunately, I was able to dip the clutch again, roll to a halt at the side of the road. And again, if I hadn't have had that refuge, obviously the results might have been more serious. I was lucky that I had enough momentum to get off the road. So for all lane running, the proposal was that there would be refuges at the intervals, but initially, I think they were supposed to be 1 kilometre apart in the initial trial. But where the running lanes have been removed full time on schemes such as the M25, the M1, the M40, and the M3 for starters, they're often 2 or 3 times that far apart, and they're all levels too, which makes it just a bit complicated. The next one is so in a real genuine vehicle grinding to a halt emergency like this, your chances of actually making it into a emergency refuge aren't fantastic. And so if you do stop on a live lane, people found it tricky on busy times to get out of the car. You open that offside door if you're the driver, or somehow crawl over the passenger seat and out the passenger seat side to get clear of the vehicle. And that will take time. And in some cases, people have been hit from behind almost as soon as they stop. Now, the protection overhead is the gantry. Now, the red lights should come on and let drivers know there's an obstruction ahead, but there are 2 problems. No one has ever answered this question, which I posed right at the beginning. If you break down beyond a gantry, how are the drivers behind you, who've just gone onto that gantry, supposed to know that there's a stationary vehicle ahead? You're relying entirely on their ability to look down the road and see that stopped vehicle. And what if there's an HGV between your broken down vehicle and the vehicle coming up the road behind you? Even if they're following at a decent distance, there's no guarantee they can actually change lane. And people panic in that situation and freeze. They might stamp on the brake. They might actually freeze and do nothing. People do not react reliably when there is an emergency ahead. So no one has ever explained how you're supposed to tell a driver who is between the final gantry and the broken down vehicle if the vehicle has just stopped. Okay, so there's a problem there. But worse than that, it turns out that instead of the gantry signs coming on in seconds after the vehicle breaks down and stops, it's been taking minutes. I believe the figure quoted was in fact up to 8 minutes in some cases. 8 minutes for the traffic officers in the control room to actually switch the gantry sign on. That's 8 minutes worth of traffic who are having to take evasive action as they come up behind that car. So it's not entirely surprising that people in that flow of traffic are getting it wrong. Okay, how quickly does a traffic officer get on the scene of a broken down vehicle? Well, that's the next problem. It's been taking an average of 17 minutes for someone to arrive on the scene and to rescue drivers. They usually get some kind of rolling roadblock going so everybody can get clear of the vehicle, and then they try and get the vehicle towed off the road. Um, the result is that the accident rate on those roads is not good. It's worse than the roads were before they were widened, despite what the stats that were being shown to us earlier. How dangerous is it to stop on a live lane? Well, actually, I've got some experience of that myself. Some years back, I had to stop, unfortunately, on a fast dual carriageway with no hard shoulder. I got the car as far over to the near side as I possibly could, which meant only about less than a third of the car, perhaps a quarter of the vehicle, was actually over the white line at the side of the road. So most of the car was actually off the carriageway. Nevertheless, 60 seconds after I'd come to a standstill, I'd literally just had time to unbuckle, look in the mirror, get out the car, and dash round. I was actually in front of it when somebody clipped the rear wing. It wrote the car off because she was actually just opening the boot to get a warning triangle out, saw the car coming and jumped clear. Neither of us were hurt. I was covered in broken glass, but we had two demolished cars and traffic piling up behind us. That was 60 seconds after we came to a standstill. So I was very lucky there not to be flattened by my own vehicle. And, my experience suggests that other people have found exactly the same kind of problems. They're hit almost before they can take some action themselves. So it really shouldn't have been a shock when schemes like this, which would be nothing like as safe as it had been claimed. As I say, the result was, of course, that the government stepped in. They immediately suspended future schemes, and they stopped work. They stalled the building in mid-construction of other smart motorway schemes. Stretch to the M20 in Kent is currently halfway through conversion. So here's my thinking. System's broken, and Highways England, unfortunately, have been attempting to turn the fault for these crashes back onto the drivers. As I said, they blamed it on poor driving, but as I say, if you're behind an HGV, how are you going to see a broken down vehicle in front of it? And if the HGV swerves out at the last moment, you may not have time to react. Remember that what is technically a safe stopping distance doesn't cover panic reactions. They've also highlighted drivers who've been ignoring the red X's, but I think that's a smokescreen. Most of those drivers actually get back well before they actually reach the obstacle, because the X's start so far back. Basically, people are getting warning so far back they've learned that the incident is way down the road. They shouldn't do it. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Shouldn't do it. They should get over and out that lane nice and early. But the thing is, they normally have a completely empty lane in front of them because everybody else has moved and they can see where the obstruction is. So, I really, and there's not many drivers who do that. So I don't think that's the reason at all. So, okay, it's broke. We better fix it. Highways England have finally swung into action. One thing they want to do as soon as they can is bring the attendance time by traffic officers down. But 10 minutes, is that still a long time, isn't it, to be stuck on the road broken down? But secondly, they've announced that they intend to put the vehicle detection systems that really should have been on those roads from the outset into action. But they need to go out to tender. Now, what does that mean? Well, it basically means they're not actually ready to go ahead with the installation. It's all still in the planning stages. So key question, how quickly? Well, apparently they're committed to speeding up this rollout. And to quote a spokesman, a radar-based system which spots stationary vehicles will be installed across the entire smart motorway network within, wait for it, 36 months. So that's 3 years. And it gets worse because the Highways England chief executive, Jim O'Sullivan, told MPs last year that it won't be easy. And he says refitting it and productionizing it so you can roll it out over hundreds of miles as a retrofit program is quite a challenge. Now, having read the press release of which came out recently. Reading between the lines, it seems they don't actually have the technology in a ready-to-build form. Actually need to procure it first. And the reason for that is it seems to be that the radar-based system that they've been intending to roll out and has been actually put in some places apparently has limitations when it comes to detecting stopped vehicles on busy roads. So Highways England has been investigating other technologies. Excuse me, one. Let's clear my throat with a sip of tea. They've been looking at other technologies that can scan CCTV images, and they'll be launching a large-scale trial alongside current radar technology. And on top of that, the support system also apparently needs to be put into place so that those cameras can be monitored. Well, you kind of thought they'd had that already, but hey ho. So 36 months, is that going to happen? Well, quite frankly, with the current crisis, I can't see it proceeding at that kind of. And it'll be see whether or not the funding will be available even after this is all blown over. I very much suspect that funding will actually be diverted somewhere else. Okay, so where are we now then? Just a reminder, you're watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams, Survival Skills, still to come. I'm going to bring you a quick update in a moment on the Norton debacle. We'll have a look at what's been up and running and cancelled and postponed in terms of motorcycling events. And we'll finish the show with some practical tips on what to do when you're laying your bike up for the winter. Okay, so over to the Norton story. Well, again, I'll just mentioned this a couple of shows ago, didn't I? But it just gets worse and worse. As you probably know, Norton are in administration, and I previously mentioned that Stuart Garner, the former CEO, is all being investigated by the Pensions Ombudsman. 30 investors apparently complained over the 3 pension schemes that Norton was running. Investors are facing losses, probably total losses by the sound of things. And one case, at least, there's up to £170,000 been invested by there's a hearing in February, which the Norton boss failed to turn up to. The pension ombudsman is scheduled to issue a ruling in May, and that will include whether or not Stuart Garner is personally responsible for breaches in those pension guidelines. Meanwhile, MPs from the Work and Pensions Committee have been voicing concern about the lack of action because they'd previously written to the pension regulator, and they said this arrangement began all the way back in 2012, and shouldn't the pension regulator have actually done something way before 2019, which was 7 years later? Okay, so the pensions, that clears up a little bit about what's going on with the pension regulator, but as I say, the story goes from bad to worse. I mentioned before that Norton had a licensing agreement with a Chinese company called Jinlang. And the idea that, or the news was at the time, that it was an agreement that Jinlang would build the engines for Norton. Well, it turns out that it wasn't just a licensing agreement, it was actually a sale of the rights to the 961 engine platform. And that sale took place before the company went into administration. Now, Jinlang, a pretty big outfit in China, they make their own Scooters 125 machines, but I was a bit surprised to discover that as well as making engines for Zhongshen, which are another huge Chinese manufacturer, they also produce the engines for Polaris, who are Indian. Now, Jinlang, so they did the deal with Stuart Garner at the end of 2019, and they say that it's not just the engine platform itself, it's also all of the engine tooling. And so if that's correct, then it wouldn't be part of the administration process, as the deal was already done. It won't be included in assets of the company. there's photographs of a contract being signed between Ghana and the Chinese company at the end of December. And what Jinlang going to do with it? Well, they say again, they're to quote, "We'll work with our design partner, sorry, in Italy. We'll work with our design partner in Italy to develop a new motorcycle using the 961 engine, which we will sell worldwide." So there you go. There's no word on what Jinlang paid for all this, but clearly the engine rights, tooling, jigs, and all the rest of it clearly wasn't enough to stop Donington, the based bike builder Norton, going into administration. So that's all pretty grim, really, isn't it? Okay, just a reminder, if you are looking for some interesting reading material, you can find my book page over at Lulu. Paperbacks on there, a couple of ebooks as well that you can download directly. Paperbacks are still out there being printed and delivered, so if you do want some reading material to keep you busy over the next few weeks, do head over and take a look at what I have put out there for you to see. Just a reminder that you're watching Survival Skills Rider Trainings, Kevin Williams, and the show is called Elevenses, and we'll be showing this show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 11 GMT. Let's go back to that picture of me. Right, okay. Sorry, I'm still struggling with the technology a little bit here. Right, so what have we got to come? I've got just coming to a story about what's on in the biking world and what's been cancelled. But remember, last story of the day, I'll be just looking at what you can do to get your bike sorted out for the potentially long layup. Right, what's gone on? Well, two paper publications have been cancelled, which are Trials Motorcycle News and Dirt Bike Rider. They're apparently going off the news shelves. I suspect that's not entirely surprising, as no one's likely to be out buying them. The sporting events which have been cancelled are British Superbikes, Alton Park and Donington, which are both in May, have been postponed. The ACU have also suggested that all motorcycle circuit racing events will be postponed at least till the end of May. Silverstone's already been cancelled, and April testing, which happened this weekend, was also suspended. So that's domestic racing on the mainland. The TT has been cancelled outright, so the 2020 TT won't be happening. The Northwest 2000, the Northwest 200, that'd be a bit of a long race, wouldn't it? 2,000 miles. The Northwest 200 is postponed for the time being. MotoGP, Qatar round has already been cancelled, and Thailand has been postponed indefinitely. Over in World Superbikes, Spanish and French rounds have been rescheduled for October. The next planned event is still Assen, which is April 17th to 19th, but I very much doubt that will be going ahead. And another race that's been rescheduled is the Le Mans 24 Hours, which would have been in April, but is now scheduled for September 5th and 6th. Okay, so that's basically what's going on out there in the world of motorcycling. Just a reminder, don't forget, Elevenses runs Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays at 11 BST. And I'm going to round off the show finally with a sort of some tips over the next few weeks of what you can do to your bike to keep it fit and healthy while you can't ride it. Okay, if you're actually in the essential industry and you're still riding, lucky devil, you can look away now. But for the rest of us who are working from home or simply marking time till we can get out on two wheels again, it's probably a good idea to do a few things to help our bike cope with the coming weeks. The shutdown, after all, is unlikely to be just a few weeks. It's probably going to be months, isn't it? So let's be on the pessimistic side and deal with the bike now rather than leave it later. Over the next few shows, I'll give you some ideas what I would be looking at and indeed what I have been doing. First thing to do is think about the battery. Most bikes will gradually discharge their battery if it's sitting. When I'm over in New Zealand and running the shiny side up uh, business over there. I've been away for 6 weeks, and I've made sure the battery is fully charged before I go. And actually, I've got a friend to just plug the charger in and give it a top up halfway through. But if you've got an alarm system on it, the chances are that your battery won't last even much more than a couple of weeks. So you're going to have to do something about that battery. First of all, have a look if you've got a charger. If you've got one, check it to make sure that it is suitable for a motorcycle. If you've got a whacking great thing which only charges car batteries, don't try to charge the motorcycle battery with it or it will cook it. Most chargers will work with car and bike batteries. There's usually some kind of indicator on either an LED, LCD display, or there is a selector switch. But do check. The other thing to watch out for is if you've already gone for a lithium ion battery. Now, I've got one of those on one of my bikes, and you really do need to check the charger carefully. Look online. I was going to try and find you a link, but I didn't get time to do it this morning. I'll try and do it later today. Have a look to see what the charging specifications are. You may find that an existing charger actually fits within the specifications. You can get lithium ion LIFE specific chargers, but they tend to come with a rather specific price as well. So it may be that your existing charger will do the trick, but again, be careful on that one. Okay, so where do you charge the bike up? Well, if you've got a garage, it's fairly easy to charge indoors, isn't it? You can just wheel the bike in if it's all outdoors and charge it up inside. You may even be able to just leave the bike parked with a battery tender running full time, in which case you can just forget about the whole thing. But if you're like me, garageless, then ideally take the bike's battery out and bring it indoors and charge it off the bike. Um, you know, I would do that probably every 2 weeks if I've got an alarm system going. Um, if you can't bring the bike in for some reason, maybe you haven't got or your bike's parked some distance away, just have a think about what you can do about that. The what last thing you want to be doing is running long extension leads outside, and connecting bikes up to them. If you haven't got a what's called a residual current device, an RSD, it's a kind of circuit breaker, but basically it protects you from short circuiting yourself to the ground with the mains current while you're walking around with an extension lead. It's something you really should be using with any outdoor tools, drills, lawnmowers, whatever. But if you haven't got one, be cautious. I'd get one. They're not expensive. They just go into the socket that you're plugging the extension lead into. And of course, don't do it if it's wet outside. It should be fairly obvious, but it's remarkable how people do dumb things like that. So, okay. Ideally, as I say, get a battery tender, leave the bike inside, and just plug it in and forget about it. If you can't do that, whip the battery out, charge it indoors. If you really still can't do that, you can think about an extension cable. And last option, you may be able to find you can find solar panels, which are actually punchy enough just to keep the battery charged up. They won't be cheap, but if you're living, if your bike's parked somewhere away from the house, you may be able to fit a solar panel to the roof of a garage, lock-up garage or something, and just run the wires down through the wall under the eaves or something and into the bike, and just give that battery a better chance of staying alive through the lockup. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end of the show. So basically, that's it for today. I'll be back with more news, views, and tips next. What is it? It's Friday today, so it'll be Sunday, won't it? In the meantime, don't forget to check out my regular biking posts here on Facebook, which I am running at. I do tips on Tuesday, don't I? And skills on Saturday. I'm forgetting what I'm doing. I'm so busy at the moment. I'm actually snowed under with work. It's amazing, isn't it? Check out the e-course as well, which you can find information about on my Facebook page. Have a look at that. Again, it was something that will give you some direction if you are stuck with nothing to do. But for now, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll catch you next time out. So take care out there, and we'll see you hopefully on Sunday. Bye for now from Survival Skills and Kevin Williams.